auto caption. Right, Michael Parker. All right, just wanted to do a quick recap before we do anything else. Just a reminder of how we will run this. Please, if you have something to say or want to make a motion, raise your hand, and you do that by opening your participants panel, and you should see there the option to raise your hand. And then if we vote on anything, we will vote yes for yes, no for no, and if you go to more, there is a coffee cup for voting or to abstain from voting. And so that will be our votes. If you need to send me a chat, you can feel free to. I'll try to keep an eye on that. And everyone is muted at the start. The way we're going to work it this time, because I was not able to keep track of everyone all the time. Basically, I'm going to call on people and Clay's going to unmute you. So Clay has offered to be the official unmuter for the Senate session. Before we do anything else, Melissa wanted to take a moment to make sure she has an accurate record of our attendees. So Melissa, you can let me know when you're ready.
Am I muted? Oh, no.
Nope.
So I think I got everybody except I don't have Justin. He's not here yet. Or Prakash. Is that correct? We don't see them, right?
I do not see them.
Okay, I think I got everybody else. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, Brian is on it and has already made a motion to approve the minutes from last week. Do I have a second? All right, Michael Stanfill has raised his hand to second. Any further discussion on the minutes from last week? All right, all those in favor, please vote yes. All those opposed, please vote no. And if you wish to abstain from the vote, please pick up your coffee cup. And Melissa, I'm muting you again so that you can let me know when you've got the count.
Yeah, I see no no's, and the only abstentions would be you and me.
Oh yeah, I didn't pick up my coffee cup, but I picked up my literal coffee cup, not my virtual one. All right. Do we have, I don't, actually is President Schott here? No, she's not. All right, I'm gonna call on Sue. Sue Walsh.
Hi, everybody. She's at the finance meeting. Our board meetings are today and tomorrow. So okay. I just spent 3.5 hours with the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting. And then the finance committee is from 4 to 6 today. And then the full board meeting is tomorrow starting at noon. Usually they're on Thursday, Friday, but for some reason, I think people's schedules, maybe, I'm not sure what the reason is, they moved it this time. The next meeting will be the tuition discussion recommendation for the board to consider in May. I hope you're all doing well. I'm hoping that week 3 is starting up for you nicely. We have sent a few messages out to all faculty, a couple of emails that were important, so I hope you got to see that. And then we'll continue to do that as we move forward with updates and announcements. Now that we have the faculty forum that we can all use, that frees up the all faculty email. So thank you for whoever suggested that. I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was a great idea. Maybe it was Tom in IT. I'm trying to, I don't really have a linear order for things. A couple of things just to update you on. The GSWS major was approved by the HEC unanimously on April 9th at their regular meeting. So now we are excited to go forward with the promotion of that new major and the certificate on transgender studies. And I am really pleased that several of you were involved in creating that major, so thank you for that. Now tell all your friends to tell all their friends to tell all their friends. Melissa presented to the chairs and directors meeting on the student evaluation, course evaluation task force work. She did a great job. She represents the Faculty Senate very, very well. And the work that the group has been doing was well received. I think that there is some excitement around this new process. People were very interested in what the program questions would look like. So you have a set of questions that would be universal to all programs, and then a specific program set of questions that would reflect more on the mission and values of that particular academic program. So good job, Melissa, and we got some good questions, and I think that there's more to come on that as she digests, along with other members of the group, the feedback she got from chairs and directors. Some of you were in that meeting, and hopefully I'm characterizing the conversation well. Thank you, Brian. We have 207 students living in the residence halls. We were down to a few dozen over the summer after finals finally finished up and spring break was sort of taking shape and people were deciding whether they were staying or leaving. So we got down to, less than 30, I think, at one point. But students decided to come back. Some students lost their residences when they left, and so rentals and that sort of thing. So they're actually looking for housing in the residence halls. And so we've actually opened them up to students who aren't, sort of traditional students who would normally live in the halls. So that's a nice option. They're doing takeout at the Hawk, and that's going very well. They pretty well got it down over the summer. So now it's kind of a well-oiled machine. And thank you to Aladdin, who used to be Aviance, for really stepping up and helping us with this challenge. The Tuition Advisory Council continues to meet. I chair that group. We have 4 students. This is mandated by House Bill 4141, 2 students from unrepresented student populations, 2 students from student government, 2 faculty members, that would be Leslie Eldridge and Dennis Slattery, and Matt and I are the voting members for administration. So we have been meeting weekly, and it's getting now to the time where we have to start really looking at numbers and making a recommendation to President Schott. All of the universities came into the academic year and especially winter term thinking that they would be below 5%. Remember that anything above anything 5 or above requires a presentation to the HAC and approval. Because of the virus, we are having different conversations. Each institution is doing something different than what they had originally intended. And several of the institutions haven't made decisions yet. We are one of those in terms of the increase for tuition. There's not much appetite to go above about 7% among the committee members, but the conversation is also focused on double digits to really actually help with the costs of the virus and the loss of revenue that we've incurred. So that's conversations continuing, and I'll have more about that. But it's, 15% increase is not where we want to be. I certainly don't want to be there. And so we're doing everything we can to try to mitigate significant tuition increases. And that is from a variety of different areas across campus. And I can take a specific question on that if you would like.
Yeah, I had one first, then I'm going to call on Brian. So, Sue, are we getting any kind of sense from the state? I guess, are we being encouraged to set tuition based on these virus impacts, or is anyone at all saying that they might be doing something so that we can kind of set it based on our original numbers?
Well, there's, the Provost Council, the statewide Provost Council meets twice a week now since the virus hit. So and Ben Cannon, who is the executive director of the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, sits in on those meetings along with Veronica Dujon, who's the university liaison. And he brings information from the governor's office for each of the meetings. I have not heard anything about tuition from either legislators or the governor's office or the HEC, but there's never encouragement to raise tuition. Now, having said that, the subtext of that is, but we know you can. And so it's really a little bit of cognitive dissonance sometimes when you are in those conversations. But no, there's been no overt guidance from any of those entities about what we should do with tuition. And it's always interesting to see what other institutions are doing. So I think I'll know a little bit more about where others are sitting. But no, there hasn't been. Now, know that we've got this CARES, I don't even want to call it a stimulus package. It's really just a recovery package, in my opinion. The stimulus package is yet to get here. But of the however many trillion there are out that they put together, we get about 3.4 million of that for SOU. Half of that, 1.7, will go directly to students. It has to go to students directly. It can't backfill any costs that we incurred. It needs to either be used on tuition remission, student jobs, the kinds of things that directly impact students' financial sustainability, I guess, for lack of a better word. The other 1.7 is yet to be, they haven't given us guidelines exactly. We assume that we have some flexibility with that money. And then the governor gets some other money that she has total discretionary oversight for, but it's for all of education. So it's K through 12, community colleges, and universities, and probably privates as well. It doesn't say public education necessarily. So when you start slicing and dicing that pot up, and I want to say maybe it's 30 million, that's what I keep hearing, it doesn't go very far. So we're hoping to learn more about that soon. Right now, it's just conversations about what might be done with that money. So we're now needing to report how much revenue we've lost since the virus has hit, which is considerable for us. Athletics, performing arts, housing is a huge one. So those costs are now being documented, and also any, so loss of revenue and then virus-related costs are the two areas that we're documenting. And we'll be reporting both to the state government and the federal government on those amounts. So.
Thank you, Sue. Brian?
So the question, and Sue, you already started talking a little bit about this, but I know that according to Linda's email, 1.7 million of that CARES Act was supposed to go towards students. So my question is, I don't know how much money that is in relation to the university, but is there any discussion of that money being used to, instead of increasing tuition, decreasing tuition?
Well, that essentially is what a remission budget could do, right? The thing that isn't clear is, well, the criteria for students to receive the funding will be predicated on some conditions like Pell or, you know, need of some sort. So not all students may be eligible for it, number one. And number two, yes, the answer to your question is yes. A buy down would be a remission effectively, or a scholarship or something like that.
And just to follow up, I think that would be an excellent conversation for the SOU board, because granted, we are in a time of uncertainty, but I think that's good news, even if it's premised in all of these different types of scenarios. But
Right.
if we can consider that we are going to use that federal money to reduce tuition, I think that's a win-win for the university, for PR, for the students who
Yeah,
have to pay for it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree at all. I think that's a great point, and thank you for kind of highlighting it. The other thing that has come up is student behavior. We're not really sure, and maybe you know, you're better to talk about that than I am. But this is the week where sort of add drop, you know, rubber meets the road. Right now, Chris put out his report today, and we're probably around 7% down from where we were last year, which is a lot more than we were when we came into the virus time, otherwise known as the Rona, I'm learning. So the Rona period, I guess. But you know, it's hard to know what's going to happen in the next few days. So we'll be able to see a little bit more fall term activity, and we'll know a little more then. You know, I don't think it's going to be like it usually is, where, you know, by the end of August we pretty much know what we're going to be seeing in September, and maybe with a few late folks here, and you know, locally they add kind of the last minute. We usually know where we're going to be. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. We have remote Raider registrations, and you'll all be hearing more about that. I just got the presentation from Danielle and Neil Wolf on that, so more to come. Your division directors were in on that call too. But we'll learn what we have as we move along, probably more slowly than we usually know. So, thank you, Brian. Other questions? I'm happy to use Linda's time. I probably already have. All right, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, I don't see any other hands. Brittany was not able to make it today, so Sarah is going to give a little update on.
Brittany said ASSAU is starting their elections process. Not much to update other than every other campus leadership is just trying to talk to their students about funds and things like that. The SFC process, we just passed it through the Senate. So it's going to the Board of Trustees, I actually believe tomorrow. So we'll see what happens with that. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah? It doesn't look like it. All right, so Kimball with the update from Advisory Council.
Well, greetings, senators and visitors. I will go ahead and give a Advisory Council report, but I would certainly invite my fellow Advisory Council members to chime in. I'm not taking as good of notes anymore for some reason, but I do have two main things that I want to bring to your attention about our last Advisory Council meeting. The first one is an issue that was raised actually 2 weeks ago on the Senate floor. We kind of remanded to the Advisory Council, and that was the whole business of tenure and promotion. And actually that was second that I was going to say, but I'll just keep going, I guess. You know, the general question of, in this virus time and so forth, what kinds of if you will, allowances do we need to make for faculty tenure, promotion, evaluation? And that kind of takes two parts, one of which is directly on today's agenda, and that is in terms of teaching evaluations. And so we discussed, in effect, because we all kind of had to rally and put our courses into distance learning mode, and evaluating those things might lead to at least wide variability and so on, that we wanted to find ways to mitigate that impact on performance reviews of faculty. And so we discussed options, and the one that we have is coming to, it's in this folder, is one that essentially we're going to recommend that to you, that you resolve that teaching evaluations of courses this term, at least, will be optional to the faculty members as to whether to be included in their promotion tenure materials. And we are, by the way, talking essentially about for next year and beyond. I mean, obviously, if you're putting together your FPAR and so on, it would matter this year. But for promotion and tenure decisions, the decisions being made this year were basically through the pipeline by the time the virus hit. So we are looking ahead, though, to how this term's evaluations affect people's progress going forward. So that's something that landed on the agenda. The other part of maybe mitigating some of the craziness is kind of the all else. And we discussed this briefly at Advisory Council. And by all else, we mean things like, what about trips that were postponed due to travel restrictions, speaking engagements at conferences? What about people who've had to put together an extraordinarily greater amount of energy on prepping classes, and that maybe have compromised their ability to make progress this quarter anyway on some of their scholarship and creative activity goals. So that sort of larger omnibus issue, Provost Walsh said she'd like to get the faculty personnel committee's input on. And as a matter of fact, then Andrew as your chair, myself as your chair-elect, and then David Bethel, who's chair of faculty personnel committee, and Sue had a smaller meeting subsequent to the advisory council meeting. And I think our emerging consensus, just to let you know, is that what we would like is for faculty personnel committee to take the first stab at crafting some proposals about how to, in essence, account for what's going on this quarter and try to make the policy or the recommendations flexible to flex not only with the length of the interruption and disruption if it should go into fall and winter next year, but also to, with an eye on the bylaws, and just try not to set precedents that we can't live with or work with should a future event like this occur. So I think where we left all of that was that Dave Bethel agreed to take this to faculty personnel committee, and we're hoping they'll give us, and I would assume they would run it through the advisory council first, but sort of a set of draft recommendations, which we will then, of course, bring back to you for much further discussion and perhaps approval. I meant to talk about the first thing first, which was we also had as guests Jody Waters and Matt Stillman. I think at least Matt is here today too, maybe Jody as well. I can only see 25 of you at a time. This also is on the agenda. The Academic Policy Committee has a recommendation on essentially how to handle grade options for all of our courses. And we had a lively debate. I won't say everybody agreed with everything. I certainly didn't, but I think we did finally kind of land on the recommendation that the policy committee will bring to you, and we'll discuss that more today. So those are the things I remember of being of substance from advisory council. I would ask Andrew, Melissa, anybody else on the advisory council, if I'm missing something, please bring it up.
I think you captured most of it pretty well. I think the kind of key takeaway on the sort of impacts on promotion and tenure stuff is that we want everyone to know that we're thinking through this really carefully, trying to brainstorm through any impacts that may not be obvious to everyone. And so we definitely want folks to be talking to their constituents and find out, is there some very unique issue that someone is worried about? Fly that up the flagpole and let's look at it. But I think the faculty personnel committee is really on top of it. And we're all really committed to making sure that it's done, that it's addressed in an equitable way for all faculty and all programs. And I would just encourage everyone to, as we've been debating the purpose and meaning of FPARS, this year's FPARS would be a great place to document any impact that COVID-19 has had on your teaching service and scholarship and creative activity. Brian, you have a question or comment?
So Jessica Pekalik, who I think she might be a co-chair of the faculty personnel committee, but at least she's the social science representative. She asked our entire division about this, and just putting this out there early for everyone. I personally, for me, I'm probably going to be applying next year for promotion. And I just kind of was thinking about this earlier, and I suggested to her, maybe there should just be like a little addendum saying, this is the COVID-19 effect on my teaching. Here's the COVID-19 effect, or Rona, or whatever Sue called it, the Rona effect on my scholarship and the Rona effect on my service. And just for some of us, I think it might be very beneficial. You change and adapt our teaching, and it might be great, but for some of us, it might not be good. So just having a little section in there for each one of those saying, even for me, I was scheduled to present a paper in San Antonio in March, and obviously got canceled, thankfully, and just saying, hey, all of these things happening from March 15th until whoever knows how long this will end. But this is the impact that this had on my career, and just mentioning that. And I think that better heads will prevail, and just understanding that all of us are working towards teaching, scholarship, and service, and here's how we try to do it at our time. I think for everyone, that should be simply, it seems sufficient and a simple answer, but I'll default to faculty personnel committee to kind of make those recommendations to us.
I guess I would like to add one more thing. I think, Brian, that's very well put. That was certainly one of the things I was kind of ruminating as an approach. One of the things we were wrestling with, and I say we, every person on the advisory council and every person in our group that, when we met with Dave Bethel and Sue, is the kind of idea of, we have sort of these elements of both top down and bottom up evaluation and standards and so forth. And I think we need elements of both in terms of how we implement whatever we do. So for example, it's already ingrained in our system that individual programs set the standards for scholarship, and in some cases for service. How does that look in our program to meet the standards in the bylaws? And that's good. One thing we don't want to do, though, is set up a system where some programs just say, okay, ole, there's, you're off the hook or whatever, and other programs to be mean and say, no, you still got to meet the standards, and if that means it takes long. So what we're trying to do is balance, I think, and the idea that maybe the Senate, in cooperation with the provost, announced sort of from the top, we think this needs to be taken into account, this being the effects of the pandemic on each of the pieces of our professional accomplishment. But then we leave it in the hands to largely, if we can, to the programs and the elements coming up to make those judgment calls as to, okay, yeah, that's logical. He couldn't go to this meeting, but then he did these 2 online papers or whatever. I'm just making stuff up. So, but that's it's going to take judgment, and it's going to take, I think, goodwill to make it all feel fair and be fair.
Any other comments or questions for Kimball or Advisory Council? All right, thank you, Kimball. All right, moving on down, we have a vote on the new graduate curriculum. And I just remembered that I had been waiting to hear about whether or not undergraduate curriculum. Let me unmute Jody. Jody, I remember we were waiting to hear from, was it the?
Yeah, from Grad Council about whether or not the changes to the catalog copy in the world languages section had been approved, and they have.
So we're clear to vote today.
We're clear to vote.
Okay, cool.
Proceed with impunity.
All right, great. In that case, is there a motion to approve the, all right, Anna, I'm going to double check that is a motion.
Yes.
Okay, and Lori seconds. Is that right? Yep, okay.
Yes.
Okay, just like to double check. That's not a question. All right, any further comments or questions regarding the new graduate curriculum? With Anna first and Lori second. In that case, I'm going to clear those, and all those in favor, please indicate so with a yes. All those opposed with a no, and any abstentions with a coffee cup. And Melissa, I will once again to unmute you.
Okay, some people aren't voting.
All right, if you are a senator, please vote either yes, no, or with a coffee cup to let us know you're abstaining. Chad, do you, Chad is thumbsing up. I think, Chad, do you know how to do the yes vote?
I'm forgetting how to do that.
You click on participant so you can see your participant channel.
Okay.
And then there's a yes. You see that? All right, cool.
There we go. Okay, so I have, the only abstentions I have are Andrew and Marianne. And everybody else I have as a yes.
All right, that looks right to me as well. Great, I'm gonna clear all. Motion passes, thank you. And we'll move on to the vote on new undergraduate curriculum. Do we have a motion for that? Brian first and Lori second. And then any discussion on the undergraduate curriculum package? Lower these hands. Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor, please vote yes. All opposed, oh, wait, Brian, are you asking a question? No, no, okay, that was an accident. Ellen, were you asking a question?
No, that was an accident. Sorry.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor vote yes, all those opposed vote no, all those abstaining, grab your coffee cup. And Melissa, let me know when you're ready.
Brian, are you in favor? Wait a minute.
Ryan just raised his hand again.
Okay, I've got Andrew is abstaining. Brian, I still don't have you voting or abstaining.
He's yes, he's voting yes.
Okay. Okay, so the only abstentions I have Matt Moriali, Paul Condon, and Andrew abstaining.
All right, so we're good. The motion passes. Clearing all those votes. Thank you all. Moving down. All right, we have our first proposal, which is around spring grade mode options. And for that, I'm going to ask for Jody and David Carter to be unmuted. And we want to unmute Matt as well.
Yeah, unmuting me is typically not a good idea, Andrew. But...
All right. So first of all, can you all kind of explain, because I know we've looked at a few different options, sort of why we landed on this option, and also explain, since this is not a permanent policy, it's sort of lives in a different world, how that works.
Sure. I don't know which one of us should do that.
If you want to start, Jody, I can help.
Okay. Well, Andrew, your first question, I think, was just how this all came about and why we landed on this option. And I think Campbell addressed that quite well in his remarks from advisory council. Concerns about just who would ultimately, I guess, have control, or who would be able to make a determination about which courses should be pass, no pass, and how that would impact both the faculty and the students. So folks in enrollment services or Rater Student Services or the registrar's office, I don't know what I'm calling it today, did quite a lot of research and laid out procedurally what 5 different options would look like. And those ranged from the student being able to just, make a determination, to the faculty, to the program, the various scenarios that would be possible. And we discussed them in academic policies and made a recommendation, and that's what you have with you, and then presented it at advisory council.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Jody. Somehow it went missing from the drive, so I'm digging it up right now. So they don't have it.
Oh, it did.
Right,
where'd it go?
it was there before.
That's just odd. I can share it. I've got it on my computer.
I found it. Okay, I'm moving it in now.
Okay. Okay, I've got it open, so I am happy to share it if you'd like.
I'm moving it in right this second. All right,
Okay.
move here. All right, so if you refresh your drive folder, it should be there now. Apologies for that. I don't know how that got moved out.
So while you're doing that, there's a couple of different considerations that needed to be looked at. They had to do with the workload that it would create for Matt staff as well as IT, what's possible in Banner, what's most viable for the faculty members of the program, and what would make the most sense and be most, not necessarily accommodating, but I think responsive to students. And I use those 2 terms with some intention there, because I think accommodating them versus responding to their needs, but also to not mortgage their futures in terms of removing their ability to have a course remain in grade mode versus pass, no pass. Because at least one of those options would have removed that ability from the student, and that could potentially impact a lot of students. Obviously, those who are looking to go on for graduate study, there's certain occupational categories or certain jobs in which it's important for them to have a GPA to maintain certain standards, and they can't have pass, no pass. So weighing all those out and knowing that we're all in a position, I think at this point, where nobody's going to be completely happy with anything, because, it's just not there for us right now. This was the option that seemed to be the most responsive to, I think, institutionally the situation. I've been thinking a little bit about this because I think, as Campbell noted, not everybody was happy, and there are going to be some faculty members and some programs who don't necessarily feel like this is the best option. There are going to be some students for whom this wasn't the best option. I think institutionally this serves us best. It allows us to protect the well-being of the students and their academic success. It allows faculty and advisors, SSCs, the ability to negotiate with their students, and it also gives them some flexibility to make a change after the term is over. So I think it really does serve us well. And it's also very consistent with what nationally has taken place at other institutions, both large and elite, as well as smaller liberal arts colleges and those that have a more student-centered or teaching-focused orientation to them. So the proposal that you have is that we look at all the courses currently in the catalog as graded only and change those to the ability to pass, no pass as well. So that gives the student the opportunity to make a decision as to whether or not they would like it to be pass, no pass. Things that are key about that is they don't have to do that immediately. They can wait until, again, 30 days after the term is ended. So they're not really under pressure to make that decision. They can wait and see how they perform. It also allows us to be able to manage that in a relatively timely way without sucking a lot of resources into making section level changes or changes that might have been determined by certain programs versus others. And that's important, I think, because there's just so much work that has to go into our sort of day-to-day survival right now to respond to the situation. So I think that's really helpful. Again, it's consistent with what other institutions have done. And we think we'll also be able to be managed really well with intentional advising to keep students from making a decision that might ultimately come back and be detrimental to them. The one thing in there that you don't see, and this was only because it was determined at Graduate Council on Thursday, is that this set of changes applies only to undergraduate students. There were no graduate programs that felt as though it would be appropriate for them to even have their students have the option to have a pass, no pass, and there's very few of them in the catalog as it is. And those ones that are now designated pass, no pass are ones that have been determined for a very specific reason. So they requested that they be recused from this situation. They don't want their students to have that ability, and they don't feel that their students would want to either. In terms of how this works, this is a change that we're proposing. It's not actually a policy. We're calling it a procedure or a temporary alteration to normal academic policy that would remain in effect for the period in which we are operating under the remote online delivery and or extraordinary circumstances, as we come to call it. But I think it definitely does have an expiry date. We just don't know what that expiry date is just yet. So at earliest convenience, we would revert to our normal academic policy. Or if folks feel as though they want to make a change based on what they learned from this experience, then they can bring back to academic policies and we would have it considered and then brought forward as a permanent policy change that would go through the normal process. So.
All right, thank you. Matt or Dave, anything you want to add before we open up for questions?
No, that was an awesome summary. Thank you, Jody.
It's the 6th time I've done it. I'm getting good at it.
All right, thank you. Kimball.
Okay, I want to preface everything I say with, and finish everything I say with, I am going to vote for this proposal. Although I have some reservations and I've made them well known at every level I've had a chance to speak, and I'm going to make them well known here. I do think this is a reasonable thing to do, given that we're already 2 or 3, depending on how you count, 3 weeks into the quarter, and the last thing we want to do is spook students, and they are our primary we need to worry about. But the concerns that I was raising, and one of the options that was not chosen by the Academic Policy Committee was to also include the right of a program or a faculty member to unilaterally change a course that had a great option to be pass, no pass. And there's lots of reasons why that might not be a great idea, and et cetera, et cetera. But one of the rationales for it, from my program's point of view, and I think some others, was that due to this rapid change and unexpected change to our delivery mode, some of us have real concerns about being able to evaluate student performance on a to F scale. So I just want to throw out there that, as Jody said, and it's very clear in the words of this proposal, that it's spring that we're doing this for. And I just want to remind everybody that, I can see some programs, perhaps mathematics, perhaps others, coming forward with saying, hey, if we're going to have to continue with this distance learning mode, we may have to make some adjustments on giving programs some say about how evaluation occurs, not just all of the choices being the students. So again, I am going to vote for this. I think it's a reasonable coping measure, but I think there's some real questions going forward.
Thank you, Kimball.
I would totally agree with that, Kimball. And I think, again, this is a change that we made just over what we did in winter term. So I think, we're just in this sort of rapidly evolving situation, and I would hope that we would do that. And we'll welcome that conversation, as I think Matt and Dave would as well. So.
Absolutely.
Brian, you had a question?
Yeah. So my question, and I heard this as a chair, so maybe your third time, Jody, if this is the 6th time, I don't know how many different times, but at least the 2nd time that I've heard this.
I just do it spontaneously now. It doesn't actually have to be in a situation in which I'm addressing a group. I just call people up and.
Well played. It's pretty consistent. So you got that down. So I'll just kind of reiterate what I heard from chairs at that meeting and from my faculty, at least in CCJ and some in social science, was there are some the question is this, is there anything preventing programs from saying to students, hey, although this is an option, we want you to be aware of the repercussions of your choices. And I understand, and thankfully, that APC and the Senate has agreed to prolong the options here, but at least giving them information stating that there is federal employers that don't like pass, no pass, and that there are certain things, at least in a catalog, stating that there's only 4, at least in CCJ, that's saying these are grade only. So even though you have that option, we want you to be aware that, you know, there are issues if you select that. Is there anything preventing programs from sending, for me as chair, from stating, okay, I see you shaking your head no. So.
Oh, no, I'm quite the
We
opposite.
would encourage it,
Right
right?
here, we would really hope that some very aggressive advising will take place, that ultimately if a student makes that decision, we can all go to sleep at night knowing that we armed them with the information that they needed to make a decision. And I had a really interesting, I can't remember who the email was from today earlier, but I had asked if we're encouraging pass, no pass. And I said, no, we're not encouraging it, we're enabling it. And that's not, you know, any sort of requirement, bless you, Sue. It's not meant to, you know, put any pressure on programs or put any pressure on students. It's an additional option that's available to students who may be experiencing what a lot of us are experiencing right now, is just some real concern over whether or not they're going to be able to, you know, perform in the same way that they would normally academically. So I would not only not discourage, yes, please do that. And we want to get a lot of really careful wording out for the SSCs as well, to have them having that the conversation also.
Thank you.
I will also say that as a matter of practice, I do run into occasions with students where, say later on in their academic career, even after the 30-day expiry would normally occur, they run into a situation where they really do need a letter grade in lieu of a pass, no pass, and I will honor that.
Yeah.
I'd never want to disadvantage a student who, for example, you know, changed a major late in their academic career and then is, you know, unduly burdened by having a pass on their record when they really need a letter grade for a graduate school application or something like that. So I do deal with those on, you know, on case-by-case scenarios as well.
Yeah, and that's a good, you know, I'm thinking a little bit, I was noting this morning when Dee sent out the McNair recruitment, you know, a student who's a sophomore or junior right now may not have any sense that they may go on to want to do a PhD and find themselves in the McNair program, you know, next year. And, you know, so that would be another scenario. So I think that we're all, you know, really thoughtful and pretty deliberate people that can try to manage these. I also was thinking, Kemble, and I can't remember, you had 2 sort of analogs that you brought up when we were discussing this in academic policies, one being Professor Grump, and I can't remember who Professor, you know, shows up and does their job is, but you had also noted that there may be some concern about not being able to calibrate as finely as one would want in order to achieve a grade that would be reflective of the student's performance, which is another argument against the pass, no pass. You know, in that kind of case, Matt, where we may have because there is an eventuality possible that a student may come back and say, I do want a letter grade, I guess we would also encourage faculty, bless you, Andrew, to make sure that they are keeping, you know, calculations of grades that are relatively precise so that they actually have a grade to go back to in case a student makes a determination that they need to have a letter grade. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I have a question from Dennis. Dennis, sorry, you're still muted.
So by virtue of the recent announcement about summer term, does this automatically apply at this point?
Yeah, I would say so, unless we face a mass uprising sometime between now and June 17th. Yep.
That's what this policy, I mean, this statement says. That's what I read, right?
Yeah.
So it'll apply to this summer as of now.
Yes.
Okay. So the second question is there a common consensus on what a passing level is? Like, say, is it a C- or a D-, for example?
The catalog level definition for a pass would be a C-. So in other words, if a student elects to take a course pass, no pass, and you record a C-, that would translate to a pass, whereas a D+ would translate to a no pass.
Okay, but university-wise, credit-wise, they get credit if they have a D-, is that right?
Correct. it's an interesting dichotomy between a pass, no pass scenario and a graded scenario, whereas you would get no credit for an NP.
We call that the Kimball Yates clause.
Yep. Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
You should be honored, Kimball.
Mark, did you still have a question?
I do. I've raised this before when we talked about pass, no pass. Instructors teaching the class don't know who in their class is taking the class pass, no pass. Is this still a good idea? Brian was talking about we should give them good advice, but I have people in my class that I don't know if they're doing it. I could probably give them better advice if I knew.
I'm going to punt that one over to our registrar because I don't know what's possible and what's not.
I'll have to look at that, Mark. Honestly, I'm not sure.
Well, we originally thought that it would make us biased graders, but I've never bought that argument.
Right.
I'll gladly look into that. It's an interesting question. I don't know if
You
it's
can send me
second
emails
or-
when somebody adds or drops. You could send me an email when somebody's, maybe in this one term period, if somebody has changed. I don't know if you could, I don't know. I could give them better advice because I see them twice a week. If I don't know it and they're making a bad decision, I can't help them until it becomes your problem, Matt, I guess is what I'm saying.
let me check on options.
Okay.
Mark, that's a good point. That also brings up a transcript notation that there will be a COVID notation on this term or subsequent terms. So that, for example, an anomaly or a peculiar set of grades, whether they're low or whether they're all pass, no pass on a student's transcript, won't just sort of magically, show up. On the other hand, I was thinking about that the other day, and of course, everybody's going to know what that term was. It's not like anybody hasn't noticed that we're living through this, but we will put a transcript notation on there. So, but I think that's a great question. I really do.
No, very much.
Jody, Sherry had asked, and I believe this is correct. This only applies to undergraduate, correct?
Correct. Yes.
This does not apply to graduate.
Yeah, and I'm uncomfortable. I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to revise what we sent forward to you because we didn't meet at Grad Council until Thursday, and I wanted to have a chance for graduate coordinators to talk that over and to talk it over with their programs, but they were unanimous in that. So if we feel like we need to, we can add another sentence or just put somewhere in there that it's undergraduate only. I don't know where this is going to live. It's not like going to be in the catalog or, so everybody just take a pen and write or just type in undergraduate somewhere in that document. And so that'll do it.
All right, Brian.
So I would just like to second Mark's idea because as chair, I've had a couple students already contact me asking, what is the option? And my simple answer was, hey, we're discussing this at Faculty Senate later on today. I'll give you more information as the week ends. And so I think it would be beneficial to faculty in general or chairs at minimum saying, hey, can you give us a list of those that at least have options? And the problem, and maybe we did this for ourselves, for our students, for flexibility, is they have 30 days before, afterwards. But, it'd be cool if the provost office gave us some language just saying, hey, and maybe I can do it for just my students saying, here's what taking a pass, no pass means. I would argue at least that CCJ faculty are trying to be as lenient as possible, at the same time holding academic rigor standards, but saying, hey, it's probably more beneficial to take the grade as opposed to pass, no pass. And I have many faculty that are against the pass, no pass simply because, a pass may not actually represent the line of work in this Rona time period. So that's all. That was the only question. Reiterating Mark's, it'd be great to have information for students that are asking this question, at least that are aimed towards chairs.
Good, thanks, Brian. I think the assumption had been, I think if this did get approved today, that we would work on language that we would share with both faculty and the SSCs as well as information for students. And we have there's a main coronavirus student information page. So we'll send it out to them. And then we'll also post it up there as well with some FAQs.
Chad?
I think you just answered my question. I was wondering, how are students going to be, how do they know they have this option? And it sounds like you just answered that.
All right, thanks. So, Jody, if I'm correct, we are hoping to get this approved today, right? Because we
Yeah,
want to
that
get
would be
this
nice.
up to the students right away. So that does require a motion to waive the 2-week rule. I believe I have a first from Lori, and whoa, I'm going to say Kimball as a second to waive the 2-week rule.
Thanks, Kimball.
'Cause I saw several hands go up at once. Any further discussion of this before I call that to a vote? All those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule, please vote yes. All those opposed, please vote no. If you're abstaining, go ahead and mark the coffee cup. And Melissa, let me know when you've got your vote. I'm trying to unmute Melissa and I can't.
I muted myself because you'd forgot to mute me before. So I got everybody. You're the only abstention that I see.
Okay. All right. So the 2-week rule is waived. So do we have a motion to approve the temporary policy? I'm going to say Lori in a second with Anna. Any further discussion of the temporary policy on pass, no pass? All those in favor, please vote yes. All those opposed, please vote no. Any abstentions, please vote with a coffee cup.
Okay, so I've got Gay abstaining and Fedoric voting no. And everybody else is yes.
Okay. All right, the motion passes. Thank you, Matt, Jody, and Dave. All right, so now we come to our sort of next responsive piece here. This is not as much of a rush, so we don't need to waive the 2-week rule for this. But this is the proposal for what to do about spring teaching evaluations, and the exact language of the proposal was posted today. I apologize that it came so late. But we had to look through a bunch of bylaws and make sure that I was covering the right ones here. So if you want to open that up, it's in the Faculty Senate Drive Google Doc called Spring Student Eval Proposal. And just to sort of give you a summary of some of what was discussed about this, we talked about a few different options. One was to simply not do student evaluations at all in spring. One was to change nothing and continue to do it the way we always do, and for it to continue to count towards promotion and tenure. There are options in between that were considered. For instance, we know that Melissa's task force has been working on the new evaluation process. So one proposal under consideration was to pilot that in the short term to see how that goes. But it was actually President Schott who observed that that having the same tool used this term might actually give us some indication of how students are dealing with the changes, and tell us a little bit about something of the student experience this term. And by switching tools midway, it might actually also unnecessarily give us an incorrect view of the new tool. So it might be a reason not to pilot the new tool as well. So this was discussed at Advisory Council pretty extensively, and we settled on the feeling that the best option is to give faculty the option of whether or not to use these evaluations, and to still collect from all the classes in order to still sort of see how students are responding to the changes in instruction. So I think that captures. If anyone else on Advisory Council wants to chime in and add anything, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, questions or concerns? I know, Anna, you had something you had said earlier. I'm gonna, oops.
Hi. So I had a STEM faculty member come to me and they don't have a solution for this, but it was just maybe a thing that they saw and they wanted, Senate to know about. And so they said that if you did choose not to use your student evaluations, then the only mode of evaluation that's coming out is from your chair. And if that happens to be biased, you don't have a second way to be evaluated in this term. And so by getting rid of that option, is there an idea for another secondary option that could be supplemented if you choose? I don't have an idea. They didn't have an idea. This was just the problem that they had seen and wanted to be addressed.
So you're saying if that faculty member chose not to include the evaluations, what other recourse might they have to
Right.
the chair's evaluation?
Right. So that it's not the only form of evaluation that would capture that time period.
Gotcha. Melissa, did you have a response or a different thought?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a response. So I would say that, first of all, they have all the evaluations from the whole rest of the year. It would just be this term that they wouldn't have evaluations to use. So they could just, the committee or even the chair could just more heavily weight the other terms. But also nothing stops the faculty member from doing their own, class evaluation using, Qualtrics or something like that. And we've talked, and I'll be talking about this more when we talk about the new sort of survey we're developing. But you can do, for your own like formative assessment, you can do, polls or surveys of students, and there's nothing to stop someone from doing that if they wanted to have another sort of voice in there.
Kimball?
Yeah, I think what Melissa just said is even stronger than what I was going to say, but it could couple in the umbrella of what I was going to say, which is don't forget when you go up for tenure promotion, one of the most important pieces is the narrative you write. In this case, I think the relevant one would be about your teaching. And so my guess is that, and if you did your own Qualtrics survey, that would be a great piece to allude to in this reflection, but also you can kind of, I think, one of the things we worried about, let me switch gears for a second, was what if we say, as we do in this proposed resolution, that it can't be held against you if you don't put up your teaching evaluations in the spring. But then there's this question, people are asking, why didn't they do it? Well, as we've discussed earlier about FPARs and so on, same thing here for promotion applications, it seems like it would be a natural thing for every one of us to address if we were going up in terms of reflecting on our teaching. And so, you wouldn't have to defensively argue why you didn't want to be evaluated, but I think you could offensively argue or discuss, what kinds of things did you do and how did you see progress in your teaching and how did you adapt and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, I suppose a mean department chair can give you a slam, but you always have a chance to reply to those too, by the way. And then hopefully your own statement with, good data and good reasoning would be a good antidote to that.
Yeah, Anna?
Thank you. I will bring all that back to the person who spoke to me.
Great. Dennis?
This would apply to summer as well, is that right?
As of right now, no. As written, it is just for spring. That is certainly something that we could discuss as a body. In advisory council, the specific feeling around this was that it was unfair for faculty to be saddled with the responses to courses that were essentially redesigned in 2 weeks. Summer courses, we of course know much farther out that anyone who may have been doing a face-to-face class and will have to do it remotely, we know further out and can certainly spend more time developing that. But certainly the Senate can debate that question if we wanted to put summer in the same category. But as of right now, the proposal is spring.
Yeah, I think that's a good rationale. My only thought would be if somebody is teaching a summer course for the first time in the remote delivery mode, it would, I mean, they still have more lead time and developmental time, but it might be still that novice period of time.
Anna, you
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't think that they have a lot more time. I mean, we're doing this term now, so you would still only have a week before it starts if you were in the first part of the summer session, maybe 2, depending on how you look at that. If you were in the late part of the summer session, yes, maybe you have more time to sit and develop it, but I don't think anybody can think about this summer's classes right now.
Thank you. Chad?
I was under the impression we didn't even include summer evaluations in the overall package. Is that not correct?
Melissa is probably our expert on the evaluations. Do you know?
I do not know. I don't remember reading anything that said summer wasn't included.
Sue?
Summer's included. Remember that most of what we do in the summer, not all, but a lot of what we do in the summer is already online. The new course prep question would be reasonable to think about, but most of what we do over the summer with respect to our ongoing courses and curriculum is for all intents and purposes remote, and those courses are evaluated.
Yeah, maybe it might be worth maybe I can reach out to Matt and find out, you know, what number of courses or percentage of courses would actually be a shift, because that's been my impression too, that we do a lot more online, but it'd be interesting to see. Jesse?
Hi. So in the MAT program, our summer courses are not online. They're 8 weeks of intensive face-to-face. So there's going to be some transition there and some replanning of those courses, not as on the fly, but I think as Anna pointed out, we have a lot this term that we're doing too. And I think part of the option for not including the student evaluation, part of the rationale, was so that we aren't penalized for student disappointment about the delivery method. They didn't sign up for, and in the MAT program, it's not like they can wait or take a different option. So even the most well-designed distance version may not be what they wanted. And so to insulate us against student disappointment, not just against hasty preparation. So I would argue that if we go into summer with that, I would be in favor of perhaps continuing that as an option in summer as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jesse. I do think there's still one distinction, which is that the students in spring literally had already signed up for the class and it changed mode midstream. But you're right that many of those students still would not have the choice of another mode if they wanted to.
There is no other option if they're going to.
Especially in your case of a program that's structured that way. Yeah. So great point. April.
Yes, I just wanted to reaffirm what Jesse was saying. Our ed leadership cohort also starts during summer, and we do an intensive 4-week face-to-face. And so while I will have more lead time to redesign some of those courses to be online, students typically coming in choose our program because it does have a face-to-face component. And pedagogically, the way that I typically teach that cohort during the summer will shift dramatically. And planning for that much intensive instruction between now and mid-June when the cohort will start really doesn't give a lot of lead time. So I too would love to see some flexibility in thinking about this extended into summer.
Thank you, April. Any other comments on this particular issue or any component part of it? Aside from the question of whether or not it should extend into summer, I would also be curious if anyone has any thoughts or feedback on the actual wording of the resolution itself. As Kimball mentioned, one of the things that was important to us was that it would not be possible for it to somehow unintentionally weigh against a faculty member by some sort of you know, hidden bias that might come up on a committee where they're looking for a reason to ding a faculty member who, and suddenly that question pops up, well, why didn't they include the evaluations? You know, are they hiding something? So we wanted to make sure that that was very explicitly stated that that's not allowed. So if anyone has any other kind of observations or concerns about the language, please let us know. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other comments. So in that case, oh, Kimball.
Yeah, it just occurs to me, several of us have brought up the notion of extending this to summer. And, you know, I think where we are right now is whatever we're doing, we're not going to vote on it until 2 weeks from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any value at all in doing a straw poll and rewriting it that way? Or would you rather just have it be an amendment come from the floor in 2 weeks? Because I think favor extending it to summer as well.
Yeah, I'm open to a straw poll for that. Let's just do it. If you prefer it to extend to summer, give me a yes. If you prefer only spring, give me a no, and give me some insight. So seems like a fairly strong majority for it to include summer. Don't see any no's on that. Does anyone want to argue the opposite? I'm happy to simply revise the proposal to include summer. Does anyone want to argue a reason not to include summer? Anna's raising your hand.
I don't want to argue for it not to. I think it should say that it would extend until the end of this. So I think any class that is being taught online that shouldn't be, chemistry is definitely one of those, should have this option until the end of this. It shouldn't be like, oh, well, if this extends into fall, now you've had enough time. The students are still going to be disappointed because it's not the same. You can't do a chemistry lab virtually.
Sure. So one thing I'll say about that, and because it may be solving a problem that won't exist, because we are bringing forward the proposal for the from the Student Evaluation Task Force this term. Right now, it is, as Stu mentioned, it was presented to the chairs this week, chairs and directors this week, and the plan is to give them a little bit of time for feedback, and hopefully by the next Senate meeting, we'll look at that for the first time. And that is a dramatically different process. It does away entirely with the whole, you know, you're a good teacher if you have 70% of this, or, you know, it does away with that quantitative part of it. And so it's a very different model. And if we were to, as a Senate body, approve that this term, that would be activated starting the fall. So keep that in mind, that that it might be a totally different system, that it doesn't have that negative impact.
So I, don't know what all it entails and how it will work, but there's still the possibility that it could be biased, just based off of the experience not being what they expected. So even if we're doing something different, I think some of the fundamental issues might still exist in the fact that they're being disappointed by the experience.
Melissa, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just ask you to wait until you hear like the whole proposal, because they're used really differently. So it really wouldn't be possible for it to be held against you in the way that you're talking about. It's not just a new formula for coming up with a score or something like that. It's really a completely different way of looking at student feedback.
Yeah. Any other comments? All right, well, I will, I guess, please take this back to your constituents. I will make the change that it will apply to summer as well. And so I don't know when I'll get around to that, but you can, as you share this with your colleagues, you can go ahead and tell them that that's what we will vote on. in 2 weeks that it'll apply to both spring and summer for now. But again, if you all debate it and want to come back and talk about extending it in a more general way, we can talk about that next week. Any other comments or feedback on this at this time? All right, thank you. Sue, I wanted to kick it back over to you. You had a minor correction to make on
Yeah,
something.
thank you. I was reading Chris's enrollment report as I was walking down from DeBoer to this meeting, and I just didn't read it right. So we're down 6.3%, not just under 7. I think we were thinking that we were possibly going to be down that much, but it looks like we're a little better off than we thought.
Great.
I just wanted to correct that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimball?
Yeah, I'd say, Sue, I'd be happy to keep this meeting going if you'll keep dropping that number some more for every hour that we stay.
Well, we're on to the announcements and new business part of the meeting. So anyone have announcements or new business? Any campus events you want to announce? Oh, Chad?
I just wanted to add a little bit of lightness. I think we're having we're supposed to be doing spring immersion right now. 40 days in the field with our students. And I think we're having a pretty amazing time right now, bringing all these students together, all our graduate students, and highlighting the idea that the outdoor industry is it's being kind of gutted right now, but we're having the opportunity to study this with our grad students, with their instructors and undergraduate students all at the same time. And we're having some pretty amazing conversations and really redefining what the idea of adventure is. And I don't know, I'm excited to see the things that we're learning right now in our classrooms, our virtual classroom. And I can see us taking a lot of these concepts and applying it to next spring immersion. So anyway, I just want to let you know that definitely things are different, but we're moving forward and we're having some pretty positive time.
Thanks, Chad. I can relate to that. This term was supposed to be in Digital Cinema our first term of emulating the Outdoor Adventure Leadership Program with our spring immersion. And what we ended up doing for that was turn it into a career design course. And because the entire film industry is shut down, we have amazing people from all over the industry zooming in with our students. And of course, it can't replace what we thought we were going to do. And I think the students probably still have some disappointment about that. But I've been getting multiple messages from my students about how awesome this experience has been. And it's been kind of one of the things that's kept me going in this time. This was getting to do these sessions with them. Melissa.
Oh, yeah, I said this last time, but I just want to say it again. We have all of our tutoring is available and online. So please do let your students know, let your other colleagues know that we do have both. We have math and science tutoring and we have writing tutoring that's available. It's virtual, but it's available. And we really want students to use this resource. They're very heavily used during a normal term and it's very light right now. And we'd like to really make sure that everybody knows they can still get tutors. And it's free.
Thanks, Melissa. Matt.
Just real quick, folks should have received an email from Jody earlier today about reporting no-show students. And in that message was also a quick note about spring grading. So just to confirm, by request, we were able to push the spring grade date by a day. So they'll be due Wednesday, 11:59 p.m. instead of Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. So if you can help spread the word with the programs, I would appreciate it. I'll of course message that later in the term as we get closer to grading as well.
Thank you, Matt. Any other announcements or new business? Oh, Sue.
Sorry. Hearing Matt's voice reminded me that he and Luke and the team that's rolling out the Navigate system have really ramped up the download ability for all of our students. Remember that we first gave it to our incoming freshmen, and then we were sort of letting other students download it as well. And he and Luke and others just made a Herculean effort to make it available to all students. So please encourage your students to download the app. Some of you are tagging your signature lines with a reminder to students to do that. This is a huge retention tool for us. If we can get students engaged and pre-registering for fall and making appointments on the spot with their advisors and the SSCs, it could be a huge game changer for us. Matt, I don't know if you can add anything to that.
Yeah, no,
Sure you can.
a reminder on that too. No, it's been very useful. If folks aren't using it already, I think you'll find it really helpful in this remote environment for helping advise students effectively and helping with communication flow and a variety of things. So Luke and I are happy to individually walk faculty through things and schedule appointments and help with it. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. Please encourage your students to use it. Please encourage your faculty to use it. It's already becoming wildly popular, and I just think that's going to continue. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt and Sue. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, well, I will officially adjourn by unmuting you all so you can all say goodbye.
Hi.
420.
420. All
Have a
right.
good one, y'all.